The parents arrived from their small town with bags full of food, several kilos of chorizo, homemade cheese, eggs, and butter. I was delighted, enough supplies for a week. My husband got a phone call from someone, and then he carried everything out onto the balcony, saying, "Mother's coming after lunch. She said she'll take it for herself." That's when my father couldn't stand it anymore. Hello, dear listeners. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel. Here's a new and interesting story for you. Enjoy listening. Esperanza left the clinic when it was already completely dark. Her legs ached so badly it felt as if her soles had fused with her hospital shoes. 8 hours in the medical office, no joke. Her hands smelled of bleach, it seeped through the gloves. Her back ached from constantly leaning over patients, and tomorrow would be the same shift again, and the day after that, too. Her phone clinked inside her bag. Esperanza fumbled for it with numb fingers, saw Mom on the screen, and stopped right there on the sidewalk. People hurried past, someone bumped her shoulder, but she didn't even notice. "Sweetheart, are you home yet?" Her mother's voice was so familiar, so warm, that Esperanza felt something tighten inside her. "Not yet, Mom, I'm just walking from work. Is something wrong?" No, everything's fine. Listen, your father and I were talking. We'll come visit you on Saturday, all right? We'll bring some treats. The chorizo came out excellent this time. Your father says it's the best he's made in ages. And the hens are laying well. I'll gather up some eggs. I've got clarified butter too, you love that. We'll bring you everything we can. Esperanza closed her eyes. God, just in time. As if her mother had felt it. There was still a week until payday, $50 left in her wallet, and the fridge was almost empty. That morning she had finished yesterday's porridge because she didn't want to spend money on lunch. The cafeteria at the clinic had become expensive, $4 for a set meal now. 4. It used to be 3. Mom, that's wonderful. Esperanza breathed. Thank you so much. Please come, I'll be waiting. What time? We'll get there around noon. The bus leaves at 8:30. It's a 4-hour ride. You get some rest, don't rush to clean up. All right, Mom. Say hi to Dad. When the call ended, Esperanza stood for a while, looking at the lit windows of the apartment buildings. Inside her, a wave of relief and gratitude welled up. Her parents were always like that. They sensed when things got really hard. They never asked questions, never pried. They just came and quietly helped. Her father was a man of few words. He could go an entire evening saying only 3 sentences, but he got things done. And her mother, fussy, bustling, but kind-hearted. Esperanza rode home on a crowded bus, wedged between someone's bag and an open coat that smelled of tobacco. She got off at her stop, shivered in the wind, and walked toward the old 5-story building at the edge of the district. Their house had been built back in the 1970s. The walls and the stairwell were peeling, but it was their own place. Just one room, 5th floor, no elevator, but still, their own. Maximiliano had inherited it from his grandmother, and that's where they got married and stayed. As she climbed the stairs, Esperanza was already picturing what her parents would bring. Chorizo and homemade cheese, definitely. Her father knew how to make them properly. Probably 10 kilos or so. Eggs, that was great too. Homemade eggs were different, with bright yellow yolks. Enough breakfasts for a week, maybe longer if she was careful. Clarified butter, now that was a treat. Fried potatoes in that butter, delicious. She could use it for porridge, or in dough if she decided to bake something. She was already imagining how she would arrange everything neatly in the fridge, how she would stand there admiring the filled shelves. 2 years of marriage, and she still couldn't get used to the constant shortage of money. At her parents' home, they hadn't been rich either, but somehow there was always enough of everything. Here, both of them worked, and yet it was hard to make ends meet. On the landing of the 5th floor, Esperanza paused to catch her breath and took out her keys. From behind the door came the sound of the television. Maximiliano was home already, rare. He worked as a manager in a small construction materials company. His schedule was irregular. Sometimes he came home early, sometimes very late. Esperanza opened the door, took off her coat, and kicked off her shoes. In the living room, Maximiliano half lay on the couch, staring at his phone. The TV played some talk show for background noise, but he clearly wasn't watching. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, texting someone, or maybe reading the news. "Hi," said Esperanza, passing through to the kitchen. "Do you want dinner?" Murmured Maximiliano without looking up. "What do we have?" Esperanza opened the fridge and surveyed its contents. The sight was discouraging. Half a loaf of bread, a nearly empty pack of butter, a small jar of mayonnaise, 3 eggs, a slice of sausage she was saving for emergencies, a carrot, and an onion in a vegetable drawer. In the freezer, a bag of dumplings and a chicken she'd been saving for the weekend. That was it. "Should I boil the dumplings?" she offered, though she had hoped to save them for Saturday. "Sure," Maximiliano agreed. Esperanza put on a pot of water and took out the dumplings. While it was heating, she sliced some bread and put it on a plate. She decided not to touch the sausage. There were still 2 days until payday, and then her parents would come. When dinner was ready, she called her husband. Maximiliano reluctantly put down his phone, walked to the kitchen, and sat across from her. He ate in silence, still glancing at the screen lying next to his plate. "My parents are coming on Saturday," Esperanza said, stirring the dumplings in sour cream. "They're bringing food from the town." Maximiliano nodded. "Chorizo, cheese, eggs, butter. Mom says they've got plenty to bring." Good. He didn't ask anything else. Esperanza waited, hoping her husband would show some enthusiasm, maybe say something kind about her parents, but no. Maximiliano finished eating, carried his plate to the sink, and went back to the couch. The phone was in his hands again. Esperanza silently washed the dishes, wiped the table, then sat by the window and looked at the dark courtyard where the bare branches of trees stood under the streetlights. November this year was raw and cold. The rain kept starting and stopping, and the slush on the roads never dried. She longed for warmth, comfort, homely peace, but everything felt gray and empty instead. She thought of her parents. Right now, they were probably sitting in their kitchen back in their small town, her mother bustling over the stove, her father reading a newspaper at the table. Their house was warm, the heating worked. It was always like that there, calm, steady, simple, without rush or tension. And it felt strange that she, who had grown up in that quiet world, now lived here, in a city apartment where her husband spent his evenings glued to his phone, and she felt lonely even when he was beside her. But Esperanza pushed the thoughts away. What was she dreaming about? They lived like everyone else. Money was tight, but who had plenty? Maximiliano worked hard. He had a right to rest. She was just tired today. That's why the melancholy hit. The next 2 days passed in their usual routine. Esperanza worked, came home exhausted, cooked what little was left in the fridge. Thursday, Friday, identical, gray, dragging. Maximiliano was the same as always, quiet, withdrawn, absorbed in his own thoughts and his phone. Friday evening, Esperanza cleaned the apartment, though her mother had told her not to hurry. But how could she not? Her parents were coming. She washed the floors, dusted, changed the bed linen, just in case they wanted to rest before their trip back. Maximiliano watched her busying about with detached curiosity. "Why are you fussing so much?" he asked without looking away from the TV. "They're not staying long." "I just want the place to be clean," Esperanza replied, wiping the mirror in the hallway. "They won't even notice." Maybe they wouldn't, but she herself felt better when everything was neat and in order. She'd always liked it that way. It made her feel calmer inside. On Saturday morning, Esperanza woke up early, even though she could have slept in. The first thought that came to mind was that her parents were probably leaving the house right now, walking to the bus station. The bus left at 8:30, so by 8:30 they'd already be on their way. By noon they'd be here. She got up, put on a simple dark blue house dress, tied her hair back with an elastic band. Maximiliano was still asleep. Esperanza went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and took some cookies from the cupboard that she'd been saving. Her parents were coming. She had to offer them at least something with their tea. There were only those 3 eggs and the end of a sausage left in the fridge. For breakfast, she made herself a buttered sandwich and tea. She sat by the window, sipping the hot drink and watching the children playing in the yard. Time dragged on slowly. By 11 o'clock, Esperanza was already getting nervous, glancing at the clock, setting the table, taking out cups, and arranging cookies on a plate. Maximiliano came out of the room closer to 11:30, sleepy and disheveled. He washed his face, got dressed, and sat down on the couch with his phone, as usual. And finally, the doorbell rang. Esperanza flinched, though she'd been expecting it. She jumped up and flung the door open. Her parents were standing on the landing, her father in his old jacket, her mother in a woolen shawl, both carrying heavy bags. Their faces looked tired, but their eyes were full of joy. Esperanza rushed to hug her mother, then her father, who awkwardly patted her on the back. Come in quickly," Esperanza fussed. "How long have you been standing out here? You should have called. I would have come down to help with the bags." "Ah, we managed," grumbled her father. They stepped into the hallway and began taking off their outer clothes. Her father set the bags by the wall and let out a deep sigh. Esperanza peeked into one of them. Inside were small canvas sacks tied with twine, something wrapped in newspaper, and jars. The smell of chorizo, smoked meat, and something homely and comforting filled the air. Maximiliano came out of the room, greeted them stiffly, shook his father-in-law's hand, nodded to his mother-in-law, stood there awkwardly for a moment, and disappeared back into the room. "How was the trip?" Esperanza asked, helping her mother remove her shawl. "All right. There were lots of people. We had to stand all the way to the station." Her mother fixed her hair and looked around. "Oh, how clean you've got it here. You've tidied up, haven't you?" "A little bit," smiled Esperanza. The parents went into the living room, and Esperanza carried the bags to the kitchen with her father. He set them down on the floor, straightened up, and rubbed his lower back. "How's your back?" Esperanza asked. "It's fine, holding up," he waved her off. Meanwhile, her mother came back into the kitchen and began unpacking the food. Esperanza watched as if witnessing a small miracle. One by one, bundles, sacks, and jars appeared on the table. "Here's the chorizo and the homemade cheese. We cut it all up," said her mother, opening one of the cloth bags. Inside were neat, even pieces of cheese. "Your father worked hard, picked the best ones. About 10 kilos altogether. I weighed it." "Mom, that's a fortune," gasped Esperanza. "What fortune?" "Eat it in good health. Here are the eggs, 3 dozen. Fresh, I gathered the last ones yesterday. Clarified butter, made it myself. We still have some honey left from summer, I brought a jar. And some fish too, your father caught them on his fishing trip." Esperanza couldn't take her eyes off the table. She was mentally calculating, "My God, this will last 3 weeks easily, maybe even a month if we're careful." The eggs alone were salvation. She could make fried eggs every morning. Butter, honey, fish, real riches. "Thank you so much," she said, hugging her mother. Then she went to her father and took his hand. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Her father blushed and looked away. "Oh, come on now. We're your parents, aren't we?" They sat down at the table. Esperanza brewed fresh tea and brought out the cookies. Her mother chatted about the news from their town, how the neighbor, Consuelo, was complaining that her chickens kept disappearing, and everyone suspected another neighbor, Amparo, who was always snooping around other people's gardens. Her father added a comment now and then, but mostly sat quietly, sipping his tea in small gulps. Esperanza listened, nodded, asked questions. It felt so good to sit there with her parents, hearing their unhurried talk, feeling their presence close by. Maximiliano didn't come into the kitchen. Esperanza thought several times about calling him, but decided against it. Why spoil the mood? Her parents didn't seem to notice his absence, or perhaps they pretended not to. Time flew by. Before she knew it, the clock showed almost 3. Her mother suddenly gasped. "Oh dear, look at the time. Our bus leaves at 4, and we still need to get to the station. Can't you leave a bit later?" Esperanza asked, though she knew her parents wouldn't stay. "No, dear, we can't. There's the farm, the chickens, the animals. We'll make it home before dark." They started getting ready. In the hallway, her mother tied her shawl, and her father buttoned his jacket. Maximiliano came out to say goodbye, politely shook his father-in-law's hand, and nodded to his mother-in-law. "Thank you for coming," he said formally. "Oh, it's nothing," waved her mother. Esperanza hugged her parents tightly. Her father awkwardly patted her shoulder again. Her mother shed a few tears but quickly wiped them away. "Take care of yourself, you hear? And eat properly, you've lost weight." "All right, Mom." Esperanza walked them to the stairs, watching as they went down, holding onto the railing. When the front door downstairs slammed shut, she went back into the apartment, closed the door, and leaned against it. The apartment was warm and quiet, and the kitchen table was covered with her parents' gifts. For some reason, at that very moment, Esperanza realized how utterly exhausted she was from the week. She stood in the hallway for a bit, gathering her thoughts, then resolutely headed for the kitchen. The food needed to be put away while it was still fresh. She took the first bag, the one with cheese, unfolded it, and froze for a moment, admiring the neat, even slices. Her father must have spent hours preparing them. Each piece was cut perfectly straight, as if with a ruler. She lifted one to her nose and inhaled. It smelled like home, like childhood, like the times when life was simpler and clearer. There was plenty of space in the fridge. It had been nearly empty for days. Esperanza began carefully placing the cheese on a shelf, wrapping each piece in clean paper. Then she moved on to the eggs. 3 dozen. She couldn't even remember the last time she'd seen so many at once. At the store, she always bought no more than 6 at a time because they were expensive. These were large, with strong light brown shells, nothing like the factory eggs. She placed a jar of clarified butter on the middle shelf, next to the honey, wrapped the dried fish tightly in newspaper, and sealed it in a bag so the smell wouldn't spread. When everything was neatly stored, Esperanza stepped back and looked at the fridge shelves. For the first time in many months, it looked full, lived in. She felt that there was finally a reserve, a bit of security in the house. She wouldn't have to count every dollar each day, worrying whether the money would last the week. She closed the fridge door and looked around. Empty bags, pieces of twine, and newspapers were still on the table. Esperanza gathered them up neatly. The bags could be washed and returned to her parents next time. The newspapers she would throw away. When the table was clean again, she washed her hands, dried them with a towel, and went into the living room. Maximiliano was lying on the couch in the same position as an hour ago. His phone glowed in his hands, and some home renovation show was playing on TV. "Got everything put away?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," Esperanza replied, sitting on the edge of the couch. "My parents brought so much. It'll last us at least 3 weeks." She looked at him, waiting for him to say something else, but he stayed silent. His fingers slid across the screen, his face distant. Esperanza sighed and stood up. What had she really expected? Maximiliano had never shown much interest in such things. If food was brought, fine. If not, also fine. He wasn't the kind of man who paid attention to everyday details. He worked, came home, ate dinner, watched TV, or stared at his phone. That was it. He rarely asked how her day was, how work was going, or what plans she had for the weekend. During the first year of marriage, Esperanza had tried to draw him out, to start conversations, but she'd grown tired. She accepted it as it was. Her husband was just a quiet man, locked inside himself. Although, with his mother, he talked much more willingly. Remedios called 3 times a week, and Maximiliano could chat with her for half an hour, talking about work or little things, while with his wife, he'd say 2 words all evening. Esperanza went back to the kitchen and decided to make something for dinner. Now, at last, she didn't have to be so frugal. She took out a frying pan and sliced the potatoes she found in a bag on the balcony. Her parents had brought those too, as it turned out. She hadn't noticed right away. About 3 kilos, probably small, but clean. Esperanza peeled a few, sliced them into rounds, and began frying them in clarified butter. The smell filled the kitchen, warm, homely, comforting, and made her mouth water. While the potatoes sizzled, she cut the cheese into thin slices and placed them on a plate. She took out some bread and set the table as if for a celebration. She even surprised herself. The ingredients were simple, yet her heart felt light and happy. "Maximiliano, dinner's ready," she called. Her husband got up reluctantly, went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and looked at the food. Chorizo? He clarified. Yeah, my dad made it. Try it. Maximiliano took a piece, put it on bread, took a bite, chewed in silence, then nodded. It's fine. No further comments followed. Esperanza poured herself tea and slid the plate of potatoes toward Maximiliano. They ate in silence. Maximiliano stared out the window. Esperanza looked down at her plate. The conversation wouldn't start, and she didn't try. She was tired. She just wanted to sit quietly, eat real food, and not think about anything. When dinner was over, Maximiliano took his plate to the sink and went back to the living room. The TV came back on, louder than before. Esperanza washed the dishes, wiped the table, and sat by the window. Dusk was thickening beyond the glass. The courtyard lights flickered on. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. It was quiet and peaceful. She thought about her parents. By now they were probably nearing their stop. They'd get off, walk the familiar road through the town, go into the house. Her mother would turn on the heat and put the kettle on. Her father would go check on the property, the animals, the chickens. Then they'd sit down to dinner, and her mother would tell him how the trip went, what they saw, how their daughter looked, while her father would keep quiet. Though Esperanza knew he worried no less than her mother, he just didn't show it. A warmth spread through her at these thoughts. How lucky she was to have parents who remembered her, cared for her, and brought food without asking too many questions. They understood that money was tight. Her mother had surely seen the empty fridge when Esperanza took out the teacups. She saw it but said nothing so as not to embarrass her daughter. She simply helped, as always. The next day, Sunday, passed quietly. Esperanza woke up late, around 10, and went straight to the kitchen. She took eggs from the fridge and fried herself eggs with cheese. She sat by the window, eating slowly and watching the yard. Maximiliano was still asleep. On weekends he usually got up closer to noon. After breakfast, Esperanza tidied up the apartment. Though there wasn't much to do, she'd already put everything in order the day before. Then she sat at the table with a notebook and pen. She decided to estimate how long the food would last and how to stretch it. It was a habit from when she had just gotten married and was trying to manage the household sensibly. Maximiliano used to tease her for it, saying she was like an accountant, but it helped her. When everything is written down and planned, it's easier to control expenses. She calculated the eggs would last 1.5 to 2 weeks if she made eggs for 2 every morning. The chorizo and homemade cheese would last a long time, maybe a month if stretched. The clarified butter would go faster, but there was enough for 3 weeks. Honey could be added to tea little by little. The dried fish was really more of a snack, best in small amounts. In general, managed properly, they would live quite comfortably until the next paycheck, and then they could stock up normally for the following month. Esperanza set the notebook aside and leaned back in her chair. It felt good to have supplies at home. It brought a sense of calm and confidence. No need to worry every day about what to cook for dinner or whether there was enough money for groceries. You could just live. Maximiliano came out of the bedroom closer to 1 in the afternoon, sleepy and rumpled. He washed up, put on lounge pants and a t-shirt, went to the kitchen, and peeked into the fridge. "What's for lunch?" he asked. "I can make soup," Esperanza offered. "We've got potatoes, carrots, and onions. I'll buy some greens, run to the store." "Okay." Esperanza got dressed, grabbed her bag, and left the apartment. The nearest store was about a 5-minute walk. On Sundays it wasn't usually crowded. She bought what she needed for the soup, plus bread and milk. She spent about $7, but it wasn't a pity. There'd be enough soup for 3 days. Back home, she got to work, chopped the vegetables and set the pot on the stove. Maximiliano sat in the living room watching soccer. Esperanza stirred the soup and tasted it for salt. It was turning out delicious. The smell drifted through the apartment, making her mouth water. When the soup was ready, she called her husband. Maximiliano came and sat at the table. Esperanza ladled it into bowls and added sour cream. They ate in silence, but Maximiliano seemed satisfied. He had 2 bowls and wiped up the rest with bread. "Tasty," he said. "Haven't had soup like this in a long time." Esperanza was pleased. Her husband rarely praised her cooking. She smiled. After lunch, Maximiliano went back to the TV, and Esperanza stayed in the kitchen. She washed the dishes and thought she should call her parents to see how their trip went, but then decided it was too late. They were surely busy with the chores by now and didn't have time to talk. She would call tomorrow evening after work. The evening passed just as quietly and uneventfully. Maximiliano watched some movie. Esperanza read a book she'd borrowed from the clinic library. A simple, light love story, easy to read and a good distraction. At 10 o'clock, she went to bed. Maximiliano stayed in the living room. He usually went to bed late, around 2 in the morning. Esperanza lay in the dark, listening to the TV through the wall. She thought about going back to work the next day. Back to the medical room, injections, 4 drips, patients with their ailments and complaints. Another 8 hours on her feet, but at least now there was good food at home, and she could have a proper breakfast. That alone was cheering. Monday started early. Esperanza got up at 6, got ready quickly, and had scrambled eggs for breakfast. Maximiliano was still asleep. He started work at 9 and could afford to sleep longer. She left the apartment at 6:30, went down the dark stairwell, and stepped outside. It was cold, the wind cut through her. She shivered, buried her face in her jacket collar, and headed for the bus stop. The workday dragged on. There were lots of patients. The line didn't end. Esperanza gave injections, set up IVs, and filled out charts. Her legs throbbed, her back ached. At lunch she ate the sandwiches she'd brought from home, chorizo on bread. Her colleague Soledad looked at them enviously. "Wow, where'd you get all that?" "My parents brought it from their town," Esperanza replied. "Lucky you. I checked prices at the store, everything's so expensive." "Daylight robbery." "Yeah, prices are so high now it's scary to go in." "Exactly. Good thing your parents help you." Esperanza nodded. "Yes, it's good. Very good." In the evening, she came home tired but not as exhausted as usual. A hearty breakfast gave her strength for the whole day. Maximiliano was home, sitting in the kitchen eating something. Esperanza greeted him, took off her coat, and went to him. "How was your day?" she asked. "Fine," Maximiliano grunted without looking up from his plate. "Listen, my mother called." Esperanza tensed up. Remedios, the mother-in-law. She called often, but usually Maximiliano spoke with her alone, without involving his wife, and now he had decided to mention it. "What did she want?" Esperanza asked carefully. "Just asked how we were. I told her your parents came and brought food." Something clenched inside Esperanza. Why did he tell her? So what if her parents came and brought food? What business was that of his mother's? She didn't say anything out loud, just nodded. "Well, was she happy for us?" "Yeah." Maximiliano set down his fork and looked at his wife. "She said it's good they're helping you, and then asked how much they brought." "Why does she need to know that?" "Just curious." "I told her it was a lot. Cheese, chorizo, eggs, butter." Esperanza felt irritation rising inside her. Why had he given her such a detailed rundown? Remedios was a special kind of woman. She lived alone. Maximiliano was her only son, and she believed that everything her son had also belonged to her. She had already come over more than once and taken things from their apartment. She'd grabbed the new bathrobe Esperanza had bought for herself, say she needed it more, and Maximiliano would hand it over without objection. Or the good pot Esperanza had picked up on sale. Or she'd pack up the leftover food after some family gathering and take it all away without even asking. And each time, Maximiliano kept quiet, no objections, no attempts to stop his mother. And when Esperanza tried to say something, he'd wave her off. "Don't be stingy, it's my mom, she's alone, we have to help." But those were just things, little household stuff. This time it was about the food her parents had brought, for her, for their family. Esperanza swallowed her rising anger and asked calmly, "And what else did she say?" "Nothing special. She said she herself would really like to taste some homemade chorizo with cheese. She hasn't had good stuff in a long time." "I see." Esperanza didn't ask anything more. She went into the bedroom, changed into home clothes, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked out the window. A sense of unease weighed on her. She knew Remedios. If her mother-in-law wanted something, she would get it, through her son. Maximiliano had never refused his mother. Never. Esperanza shook her head, chasing away dark thoughts. What was she imagining? Maybe nothing would happen. The mother-in-law had simply asked, that's all. No need to worry in advance. But the anxiety didn't go away. It stayed like a quiet lump in her chest and nagged at her all evening. The next few days passed in their usual rhythm. Esperanza worked, and so did Maximiliano. In the evening she cooked dinner, they ate, then each did their own thing. Her parents called on Wednesday. Esperanza spoke with her mother for a long time, telling her how she had divided up the food and how delicious everything was. Her mother was pleased. Her father wouldn't take the phone. He was shy about talking on it, but her mother sent his greetings. On Friday evening, when Esperanza came home from work, Maximiliano was sitting in the kitchen talking on the phone. She could tell from his tone, his mother. He was speaking quietly, but she caught fragments. Yeah, Mom, we have it. Of course I'll bring it. Okay, don't worry. Esperanza went into the bedroom, dropped her bag, and got changed. Her heart was thudding with unease. Something was wrong. She felt it in her bones. Maximiliano ended the call and came into the hallway. Esperanza stood by the coat rack, looking at him questioningly. Mom called, he said, avoiding her eyes. She says she's having guests tomorrow. Needs to set a table. She asked for help. And how are you planning to help? Esperanza asked, though she already suspected. Well, I was thinking. Maximiliano hesitated, then finished. Maybe we could give her some chorizo and cheese. And some eggs? We've got plenty, enough for at least a week. And Mom needs to treat her guests. She lives alone. It's hard for her to go shopping. Her pension is small. Esperanza was silent. Inside, everything went cold. There it was. She knew this would happen. Maximiliano, my parents brought that, for us, for our family. So what? My mom and I are family too. She's alone. She needs it more. We're young. We can earn more and buy our own, but she can't live large on a pension. Your mother gets a perfectly decent pension. You said so yourself. And if she wants to host, she can go to the store and buy what she needs. Esperanza, don't be stingy. She's my mother. We'll give her, 5 kilos of cheese and chorizo and a dozen eggs. Why is that such a big deal? It is a big deal, Esperanza said firmly, because it's not yours, or mine, to just hand over. My father made it, spending days on it. My mother collected those eggs, walking through the henhouse every day. They did it for us, not for your mother. Maximiliano grimaced. Are you serious? You're making a scene over some cheese? This isn't a scene. It's just fair. If your mother wants chorizo, she can buy it. Or you can buy it for her if she's so important to you. I don't have spare money, you know that. Maximiliano began to bristle. Payday is a week away, and her guests are tomorrow. Do you expect her to greet them with nothing? She can cook with what she has. It doesn't have to be chorizo and cheese. God, why are you so stubborn? Esperanza turned and went into the bedroom. She slammed the door and sat on the bed. Her hands were shaking with anger and hurt. How dare he talk like that? Her parents spent 4 hours on a bus, lugging heavy bags to help them, their daughter and son-in-law. And he wanted to hand it all to his mother, who was forever wheedling something. Maximiliano paced the hallway, then came back into the bedroom. Esperanza, can we just talk like adults? I don't want to talk, she snapped. Come on, really? It's just a little chorizo and cheese. We still have a ton left. No. Esperanza. I said no. Period. Maximiliano stood there, sighed heavily, and left. The kitchen door banged. Esperanza sat on the bed with her fists clenched. She was boiling inside. She wasn't going to give in. Not for anything. These were her parents' provisions, hers. And if Maximiliano couldn't understand that, that was his problem. The evening passed in tense silence. Maximiliano sat in the kitchen. Esperanza stayed in the bedroom. She didn't go to dinner. She didn't want to see her husband. She went to bed early, turned to the wall. Maximiliano came in late, lay down without a word, didn't try to make peace, said nothing, just lay down and fell asleep. And Esperanza lay in the dark thinking that tomorrow was Saturday, and something told her the story with the food wasn't over yet. Saturday dawned gray and overcast. Esperanza woke early, though she could have slept in, it was her day off. But sleep vanished the moment she opened her eyes. Yesterday's conversations, the tense evening, Maximiliano's silence all came back at once. She turned her head. Her husband was still asleep, lying on his back, breathing evenly. Esperanza got up quietly, put on her robe, and went to the kitchen. The first thing she did was open the fridge. Everything was in place. The cheese and chorizo lay neatly on the bottom shelf, wrapped in paper. Eggs in the carton. Butter, honey, fish. Everything just as she'd left it. Esperanza closed the door and exhaled. See? She'd wound herself up for nothing and everything was fine. Maybe Maximiliano really wouldn't touch anything. Maybe he understood she was serious. She put the kettle on and took a mug. While the water heated, she stood at the window, looking into the courtyard. The janitor was sweeping leaves into piles. The wind rattled the bare branches. Somewhere in the distance a dog was barking. A normal weekend morning. The tea was ready. Esperanza poured it and sat down. She drank slowly, small sips, trying to collect her thoughts. She had to decide how to handle things. If Maximiliano brought up the food again, she'd stand her ground, firm and calm, no hysteria, no fight. Just no. That's all. About 20 minutes later she heard footsteps in the hallway. Maximiliano shuffled out, rumpled, and just his underwear and a t-shirt, went to the bathroom, washed up, and came back to the kitchen. Esperanza sat at the table finishing her tea. He walked past her to the fridge, opened it, took out some milk, poured himself a mug, took a sip, stood with his back to her, silent. "Good morning," Esperanza said in a neutral tone. Maximiliano grunted. He set the mug on the table and sat across from her, staring off to the side, not meeting her eyes. Esperanza waited. She knew he'd say something. Any second now. "Listen," Maximiliano began at last, turning toward her, "let's not be resentful, okay? I talked to Mom again yesterday. She really is in a tough spot. The guests are coming this afternoon and her fridge is empty. She won't get her pension for another week. She can't go to the store with prices like these." Esperanza listened silently. The boil inside her started up again, but she held it down. "I get that your parents put in the effort," Maximiliano went on. "But we can share, can't we? Really, 3 kilos of cheese, some chorizo, a dozen eggs. It won't hurt us, and it'll help my mother a lot." "No," Esperanza said calmly. "Esperanza, come on. I explained everything yesterday." "No, period." Maximiliano pressed his lips together. His face grew tense. "Do you realize you're putting me in an awkward spot? I promised my mother I'd help. You had no right to promise what doesn't belong to you." "How does it not belong to me? We're husband and wife. What we have is shared." "Shared," Esperanza agreed, "but this was brought specifically by my parents. For me. And I decide what happens to it." Maximiliano stood abruptly and paced the kitchen. He stopped at the window, stood there looking out. Then he turned. "You know what? You're just stingy, unbelievably stingy. You can't share with a close relative." Esperanza felt everything inside her twist with hurt. Stingy. He'd called her stingy. She, who had scrimped on everything for the last 2 years so they'd have enough to live on. She, who wore out old clothes so she wouldn't spend on new ones. She, who counted every dollar. "If I'm stingy, then what is your mother?" Esperanza asked quietly. "The one who takes something every time she comes. Remember when she took my robe? Brand new. I'd only worn it a month. Said she needed it more. You didn't even ask my opinion, you just gave it to her. Or the pot I bought on sale, or the leftovers from your birthday party, she packed it all up and took it away. Did I complain even once? No. I kept quiet. I put up with it. But this time we're talking about what my parents brought, and I will not let you take it." Maximiliano looked at her in some kind of bewilderment, as if seeing her for the first time. "You're serious?" "More than serious." He sighed heavily and ran a hand over his face. "Fine. Okay. Forget it. I'll tell my mother you're against it. Let her see what kind of wife I've got." He left the kitchen, slamming the door. Esperanza stayed at the table. Her hands trembled. She poured herself more tea but didn't drink it, just held the mug, warming her fingers. About 10 minutes passed. Esperanza sat motionless, trying to calm down. Then she heard Maximiliano's phone ring in the hallway. He answered at once. His voice was muffled, but she caught the words, "Yes, Mom, I understand." "No, she won't let me. What can I do?" "I'll think of something." The call lasted 3 minutes at most. Then Maximiliano went into the bedroom and closed the door. Esperanza got up, walked to the fridge, opened the door, and checked once more. Everything was still there. She didn't even know why she was checking. She just wanted to be sure. The next hour passed in silence. Esperanza tidied the kitchen, washed the dishes, wiped the table. Maximiliano stayed in the bedroom and didn't come out. Around 11 she decided to go to the store to buy bread and milk. She got dressed, picked up her bag, peeked into the bedroom. Her husband was lying on the couch with his phone. "I'm going to the store," Esperanza said. "Okay," Maximiliano replied without looking up. She left the apartment and went down the stairs. Outside, the air was fresh, the wind tugged at her hair. Esperanza walked slowly toward the store, thinking about everything that was happening. Maybe she really was being stingy. Maybe she should have given in, handed over a little chorizo and homemade cheese so as not to spoil the relationship. But then an image rose in her mind, her father hauling heavy bags up the stairs, her mother laying the food out on the table, their tired but pleased faces, and everything inside her tightened again. No, she was doing the right thing. Her parents had put in the effort. She wouldn't let anyone else decide what to do with their gift. At the store she bought bread, milk, and a pack of cookies. She spent only a little, about $3. She stood in line at the register, looking at people with overflowing carts. Did they have the same problems? Or was it just her? She walked back unhurriedly. She climbed to the 5th floor and opened the apartment door. It was quiet in the hallway. Too quiet. Esperanza took off her coat and shoes and went to the kitchen, set the bag on the table, and started taking out her purchases. Then she heard Maximiliano's voice. He was on the balcony, talking on the phone. The door was ajar, and she caught snatches. "Yeah, Mom, we've got everything. I'll bring it out to the balcony and you can pick it up. Chorizo, cheese, eggs, butter. Of course it'll be enough for the guests. Don't worry, I'm packing it now." Everything inside Esperanza dropped at once. She froze, unable to move. A second, two. Then she turned sharply and went to the balcony. Maximiliano was standing with his back to her, still talking. "You'll be at the entrance in half an hour? Okay, I'll bring it down." Esperanza shoved the balcony door. Maximiliano turned, saw her, and went pale. He quickly ended the call. "Mom, I'll call you back," and shoved the phone into his pocket. "What are you doing?" Esperanza asked. Her voice was shaking, but she held herself together. "Look, don't make a scene," Maximiliano began. "I just wanted to help my mother." "Help? You were going to give her our food, the food my parents brought us?" "Not all of it, just a little. 3 kilos of cheese, some chorizo, a dozen eggs. We'll manage." "Manage on pasta, right?" Esperanza felt fury rise inside her. "While your mother serves our cheese and chorizo to her guests, the ones my father made, the ones they spent 4 hours on a bus to bring us? Esperanza, she's my mother. So what? Does that give you the right to dispose of what doesn't belong to you?" Maximiliano pressed his lips together and looked at her with irritation. "You know, I'm sick of your hysterics. I want to help my mother, and I'm going to, whether you like it or not." He walked past her into the kitchen. Esperanza followed. Maximiliano opened the fridge and started taking out cheese and chorizo, piling them on the table. Then he reached for the eggs. "Don't," Esperanza said quietly. "What?" Maximiliano turned, the egg carton in his hands. "I said, don't." "Esperanza, move, I'm busy." "Put it back." "No." They stood staring at each other. Esperanza felt her heart hammering in her chest. Maximiliano looked away first, set the carton on the table, and began transferring the eggs into a bag. Esperanza stepped up, took the bag, and put the eggs back in the fridge. "What are you doing?" Maximiliano burst out. "Putting back what you're trying to steal." Steal? Maximiliano flushed crimson. It's my food too. I live in this apartment. I have a right to decide about the groceries. You do, but not these. These were brought by my parents for me. Maximiliano grabbed the chorizo and cheese from the table and carried them to the balcony. Esperanza followed. He stuffed everything into an old bag that was lying there. He worked quickly and nervously. Esperanza stood in the doorway, watching him, not knowing what to do. Snatch it away? Shout? Call someone for help? Maximiliano finished packing and came back to the kitchen for the eggs. Esperanza blocked his way. Maximiliano, if you take this food and give it to your mother, I don't know what I'll do, but it will be the end. The end of what? He sneered. My patience, my respect for you, everything. Oh, come on, Maximiliano waved her off. You're turning a piece of cheese into a tragedy. Do you hear yourself? Over cheese. It's not about cheese. It's about you not respecting me or my parents. You think you can do whatever you want and I should keep quiet. I think my mother matters more than your whims. He shoved past her shoulder, went to the fridge, took the eggs, and carried them to the balcony. Esperanza stood there, feeling everything inside her collapse. She couldn't believe this was really happening, that her husband, the man she'd lived with for 2 years, could so calmly ignore her words, her feelings. Maximiliano came back and took the jar of clarified butter. That too? Esperanza asked. Yes, she asked for it. Your mother asked. And my parents rode 4 hours on a bus to bring it to us. So what? They don't mind. How do you know? I just know. Parents are always happy to help their kids. My parents, yes. Your mother is only happy to take. Maximiliano stopped and looked at her with a cold anger. Don't you dare talk about my mother like that. Why not? Isn't it the truth? She's always wheedling something, always needs something, and every time you go along with it. Because I love and respect her, unlike you. I love my parents too, but I don't haul things from our home over to them. Maximiliano said nothing, carried the butter to the balcony and set it carefully in the bag, then came back and started packing it all into sturdier bags so it would be easier to carry. Esperanza stood beside him, watching his actions, feeling completely powerless. What could she do? Rip the bag from his hands? Lock the balcony door? Call someone? The police? Ridiculous. Maximiliano finished packing and picked up the bag. I'm taking this downstairs. My mother will be here in 10 minutes. Don't start a scene, okay? I'll be back and we'll talk calmly. He went into the hall, put on his shoes, and threw on his jacket. The bag dragged at his arm, heavy, 8 kilos at least. Esperanza followed, standing in the bathroom doorway, watching as her husband prepared to carry out of the house what belonged to her. Maximiliano? She called. He turned. What? You'll regret this. He smirked. Is that a threat? A warning? Maximiliano shrugged, opened the door, and left. Esperanza heard him going down the stairs, the building's front door slamming. She went into the bedroom, walked to the window, and looked down. A minute later she saw Maximiliano come out of the entrance with the bag, stand there glancing around, then a car pulled up. Esperanza recognized it, the old beige car Remedios drove. Her mother-in-law got out and waved to her son. Maximiliano went over, they talked about something. Remedios peered into the bag, nodded approvingly, then hugged her son and patted him on the back. Maximiliano loaded the bag into the trunk. They talked a bit more, and Remedios drove off. Maximiliano stood a moment watching the car, then went back inside. Esperanza stepped away from the window, sat on the edge of the bed, and folded her hands on her knees. Inside she felt empty and cold. She didn't cry. She just sat and stared at one spot. A couple of minutes later the apartment door opened. Maximiliano came in, took off his things, and walked into the bedroom. He saw his wife sitting on the bed. Well, he said, trying to sound calm, nothing terrible happened. My mother's happy, she'll treat her guests. And we'll buy more when we get paid. Esperanza was silent. Esperanza, stop sulking already. I get that you're upset, but she's my mother. I couldn't refuse her. Esperanza looked up at him. You could have, you just didn't want to. What do you want from me? To abandon my mother and not help her? I want you to think about me for once, about what matters to me, about what I feel. I do think about you. No, you think about yourself and your mother. I'm just background to you. Maximiliano winced. All right, I don't want to fight. Let's talk later, when you've calmed down. He left the room. Esperanza stayed sitting on the bed. Time passed slowly. She had no idea how long it had been, 10 minutes, 20. She just sat there, trying to figure out what to do next. And then the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. Esperanza flinched. Maximiliano went into the hallway, opened the door, and there stood her father on the threshold. Esperanza heard his voice, calm and low. "Hello, Maximiliano." "Hello," the son-in-law answered, flustered. "Did something happen?" "I forgot my glasses," her father said curtly. "Left them in the kitchen the last time we came." Esperanza quickly stepped out of the room and saw her father standing in the doorway. He was wearing the same jacket and his old cap, his face serious and tired. "Dad," was all she could breathe out. Her father nodded to her and walked down the hall. Esperanza led him into the kitchen. Maximiliano stood in the entryway, clearly not understanding what was going on. Her father went into the kitchen, looked around, walked over to the table where he had sat last time, glanced about, then opened the fridge. Esperanza stood in the doorway, her heart pounding. Her father silently inspected the shelves. Then he closed the door and turned to Maximiliano, who had followed him in. "Where's the food?" her father asked. "What food?" Maximiliano tried to dodge it. "The food we brought. The cheese, chorizo, eggs, butter." Maximiliano hesitated, blushing. "Well, some of it is still left." "Where's the rest?" "I gave it to my mother. She needed it. She had guests coming." Her father was silent, staring at his son-in-law with a long, heavy gaze. Maximiliano fidgeted and looked away. Then her father asked, "Did you ask my daughter's permission?" "Well, I thought, we're husband and wife, everything's shared." "Shared," her father repeated slowly. "So I rode a bus for 4 hours and hauled those bags so your mother could entertain her guests?" "No, I didn't mean it like that." Her father raised a hand to stop him and walked out to the balcony. Esperanza saw him look over the empty bag that was lying there. He returned to the kitchen. He looked at Maximiliano again, and the latter involuntarily stepped back. "Listen to me carefully," her father said quietly, but in a way that made Maximiliano turn pale. "This food belongs to my daughter, to my family. I spent days curing and packing all of it, set it aside especially for them. My wife gathered the eggs, rendered the butter, everything for them. Got it? For them. Not for your mother, not for your mother's guests, for my daughter. I understand, but..." "No buts. If you want to treat your mother, earn your own money and buy it. Don't touch someone else's food that was meant for my daughter." Maximiliano swallowed. He tried to say something, but her father went on. "And if I ever see you do that again, I won't come for my glasses. I'll come with a suitcase and take my daughter home, because she isn't valued here. Do you understand me?" Maximiliano nodded. His lips trembled, his face had gone white. "I understand," he forced out. Her father stood there a moment longer, looking at his son-in-law. Then he turned to Esperanza. "How are you, honey?" Esperanza couldn't answer. She walked up to her father and hugged him. He patted her back awkwardly. "It'll be all right," he said softly. "Don't worry." He stepped back, looked her in the eyes, nodded, and headed for the door. Maximiliano stood in the hall, not daring to move. Her father walked past him, opened the door, and turned back on the threshold. "Take care of your wife," he said to Maximiliano, "or you'll lose her." And he left. The door closed quietly behind him. Esperanza stood in the kitchen, listening to her father's footsteps going down the stairs. Maximiliano didn't move. He stood there pale and bewildered, then slowly went into the living room and sat on the couch. Esperanza went to the window and looked down. She saw her father walk out of the building and cross the courtyard without looking back. She stood by the window for a long time. Maximiliano stayed in the other room, silent. The apartment was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Esperanza thought about how her father hadn't even come for his glasses. He had just come back because he sensed something. Or maybe her mother had told him the kitchen table was bare when she was getting the teacups, and he understood. Another 20 minutes passed. Finally, Maximiliano came out of the room. He walked over to the phone, picked it up, and dialed. Esperanza heard him say, "Hi, Mom. Listen, about the groceries I brought, no, everything's fine. It's just that I need to bring them back. I need them, Mom, please don't argue. I'll come by this evening and pick them up. Yes, all of it. The cheese, the chorizo, the eggs. Because I have to. Okay, see you tonight." He hung up and looked at Esperanza. She stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at him silently. "I'll bring everything back," Maximiliano said. "I'll go to my mother's tonight and get it." Esperanza nodded. "All right." They didn't talk anymore. Maximiliano sat in the living room, Esperanza stayed in the kitchen. Each in their own corner, with their own thoughts. Somewhere outside a dog barked again. A car passed by. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary day. But inside Esperanza something had changed. Something had finally broken, and something else, on the contrary, had fallen into place. In the evening Maximiliano went to his mother's. He returned 2 hours later with the same bag, heavy and dragging down his arm. He silently carried it into the kitchen and began taking out the food. Esperanza helped put everything back into the fridge. The cheese, chorizo, eggs, butter, all returned to their proper places. "Mother wasn't happy," Maximiliano said, standing by the fridge. Esperanza said nothing. She said, "You've spoiled my character." "Maybe I have," Esperanza answered quietly. Maximiliano looked at her, wanted to say something, but thought better of it. He simply left the kitchen. Esperanza was left alone. She sat at the table, laid her hands on the surface, stared at the closed fridge door, and wondered what would happen now. Remedios, of course, took offense. She didn't call or write. Maximiliano, too, walked around gloomy and silent. But the food stayed in their home, in its place, where it belonged. And for the first time in a long while, Esperanza felt that she had solid ground under her feet, that her father, a taciturn man from a small town, had protected her. He simply came and told the truth, no shouting, no scandal, calmly and firmly, and that turned out to be enough. Sunday started late and quiet. Esperanza woke to the loud caw of a crow outside the window. She opened her eyes and looked at the clock, 10:30. The sheet next to her, where Maximiliano slept, was cool. He must have gotten up a while ago. She got up, threw on a robe, and went out of the bedroom. Her husband was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee and looking out the window. He turned when he heard her steps. His face was tired, with dark circles under his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't slept well either. "Good morning," Esperanza said. "Morning," Maximiliano grunted, and stared out the window again. Esperanza put on the kettle and took a mug from the cupboard. The silence between them was heavy and tense. Each was waiting for the other to speak, but neither did. The water boiled. Esperanza brewed tea and sat down at the table across from her husband. "Listen," Maximiliano began, without looking at her. "Mother called again yesterday, after I brought the food back." Esperanza stayed silent, sipping her tea in small sips. "She said I'm henpecked, that you boss me around, that I've forgotten my own mother." "And what did you say?" Maximiliano hesitated, turning the mug in his hands. "I said she was wrong, that you were just protecting what your parents had brought us, and that I was wrong to take it without asking." Esperanza raised her eyes and looked at her husband. "Did you really tell your mother that?" "Yes." "Was she upset?" Esperanza asked. "Oh, very. She said I betrayed her, that I chose a stranger over my own mother." "A stranger?" Esperanza felt anger starting to boil up again. "I'm your wife." "That's what I told her. But she doesn't listen. She hung up and hasn't called back." Maximiliano sighed heavily and rubbed his face with his hands. "You have to understand, it's hard for me, too. My mother's been alone since my father died, and I'm her only child. I've always tried to help and support her, and now she thinks I've turned my back on her." Esperanza listened and suddenly realized she was seeing her husband as if for the first time. He sat there bewildered and tired, torn between his mother and his wife, and she felt sorry for him, not enough to forgive what he'd done the day before, but still. "Maximiliano, nobody is asking you to abandon your mother," she said calmly. Help her, visit her, call her, but not at my expense, not at the expense of my parents. If you want to buy her groceries, then buy them with your own money, earn it, go to the store, bring it to her, but don't take what belongs to me." "I get it already," Maximiliano muttered. "Your father explained it very clearly yesterday. Were you afraid of him?" Maximiliano was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I was." He spoke so calmly, but it was scary, like he wasn't joking, like he really would come and take you away. "And would you want me to leave?" Maximiliano finally looked at her. "No, I wouldn't." They didn't talk any more that morning. Esperanza made breakfast, scrambled eggs for two, sliced some bread and cheese. They ate in silence, but the tension had eased a little. Maximiliano even looked at his wife a couple of times, as if he wanted to say something but didn't dare. After breakfast he went to the bedroom, while Esperanza stayed in the kitchen, washed the dishes, wiped the table, then sat by the window and dialed her mother. She picked up right away. "Hi, sweetheart, how are you?" "I'm fine, Mom. How are you?" "Everything's good. Your father's puttering in the shed, and I'm making lunch here." "And you too?" Esperanza hesitated. Should she tell her or not? But her mother seemed to sense something from the pause. "Did something happen?" "Mom, Dad came to see us yesterday." "Yes, he said he'd forgotten his glasses and went to pick them up." "He didn't forget his glasses, Mom." "What do you mean he didn't?" her mother said, surprised. "Then why did he go?" Esperanza sighed and told her everything, how Maximiliano had wanted to give the food to his mother, how they'd argued, how he'd taken the chorizo, cheese, and eggs while she was at the store, and how her father came and set everything straight. Her mother listened quietly, only sighing now and then. "Good Lord," she said at last, "so that's how it was. Your father didn't tell me a thing, just said he went and everything was fine." "He did great, Mom. Tell him thank you." "Oh, yes. That's how he is, few words, but if something happens, he'll always defend you. I remember when we were young, there was a neighbor who got into the habit of taking firewood from our yard. Thought we didn't notice. Your father said nothing, just put up with it. Then you went to that neighbor, calm as you like, and said, 'Either stop or you'll regret it.' And you know, the man never came near our wood again." Esperanza smiled. "Yes, Dad knows how to stand his ground when necessary." "Mom, do you think I did the right thing not giving it away?" "Of course you did, sweetheart. They brought it for you, not for his mother. If she wants chorizo and cheese, let her go to the store herself, or let her son earn money and buy it. Taking someone else's things isn't right." Maximiliano says she's offended. She's not calling him. Let her be. She'll sulk and then get over it. You, above all, don't let people push you around, understand? Give in once, then twice, and you'll spend your whole life under someone's heel. "I understand, Mom. That's my girl. All right, honey, I have to go. Lunch is on the stove, I need to watch it. Take care of yourself, you hear? And if anything happens, call. Your father will come anytime he's needed." "Thank you, Mom. Don't mention it. We're your parents. Who else will help if not us?" When the call ended, Esperanza sat for a while longer with the phone in her hands. Her heart felt warmer. It's a comfort knowing your parents are there, that they'll support you in any situation, not with lectures, but with action. Like her father yesterday, he came and protected her, simply and reliably. The next week passed more calmly. Maximiliano was quiet, even tried to help around the house, took out the trash without reminders, washed the dishes after dinner. Esperanza could see he was trying to make amends, but she said nothing, just watched. Remedios didn't call. She kept silent, stubbornly, demonstratively. Maximiliano called her a couple of times himself, but she answered curtly, said she was busy, and hung up. He walked around gloomy after those calls, but he didn't complain to Esperanza. He knew it was his own fault. On Wednesday evening, while they were having dinner, Maximiliano suddenly said, "Listen, maybe we should go to my mother's this weekend. You know, to make peace somehow." Esperanza looked up from her plate. "Maximiliano, do you want me to apologize to your mother?" "No, that's not it. We could visit her, show we're not at odds." Maximiliano, we're not at odds. It's your mother who's upset because she didn't get what she wanted. If you want to see her, go ahead, I don't mind, but I'm not going. Why not? Because I don't want to. I'm not ready to look at her and pretend everything's fine. Maximiliano frowned, was about to argue, then waved it off. All right, I'll go by myself. Go, but without bringing goodies, okay? He grimaced, but nodded. Okay. On Saturday he did go to his mother's. He came back in the evening, grim and silent. Esperanza didn't pry, but from his expression she understood. The conversation had been difficult. He sat in front of the TV all evening, hardly speaking, and only before bed, when they were already lying in the dark, he said, "Mom asked when you're coming to see her. And what did you say?" "I said I don't know, that it's up to you." "You said the right thing." Maximiliano sighed. "She thinks you're to blame for everything, that you're turning me against her." "And what do you think?" He was quiet for a long time, then answered, "I think you're both right in your own ways. But I'm the one who has to live with you, not with her." Esperanza said nothing. It was unexpected. For the first time in 2 years of marriage, Maximiliano had said something like that. Maybe her father's visit really had an effect on him. Another 2 weeks passed. They got paid, and Esperanza stocked up on groceries for the month. The fridge was full, and she felt at ease. Her parents' gifts were running out, but they lasted exactly as long as she had planned. The cheese, chorizo, eggs, butter, she stretched them wisely, frugally. There was even some honey left, which she added to her tea little by little. One evening, while Esperanza was making dinner, the landline rang. Maximiliano picked up, and Esperanza heard him say, "Hi, Mom. Work's fine." "Esperanza's fine too." "Okay, I'll ask." He hung up and came to the kitchen. "Mom's inviting us over this weekend. Says she wants to make peace." Esperanza stirred the soup without turning around. "Are you going?" "I don't know. Will you come with me?" Esperanza thought it over. On the one hand, she didn't want to see her mother-in-law. On the other, she couldn't avoid her forever. She was her husband's mother, after all. But just to show up as if nothing had happened? No, that wouldn't do. "Maximiliano, I'll go on one condition." "What condition?" "Your mother has to understand that she won't take our things or food without asking anymore. If she needs something, she asks first, and I will decide whether to give it or not. If you can get her to agree to that, I'll go." Maximiliano grimaced. "You want me to say that to my mother?" "I do. Otherwise I don't see the point. We'll come, she'll pretend she's forgiven us, and a week later she'll start demanding things again. I'm tired of it." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll tell her." He went into the hallway and dialed his mother. Esperanza heard fragments. "Mom, we'll come, but there's a condition." "No, not mine, Esperanza's. She says she won't put up with you taking our things without asking anymore." "Mom, wait, listen. If you need something, ask first." "No, I didn't make this up. Esperanza said it. Because it's fair, Mom." "Well, as you wish, then we won't come." Silence. Esperanza held her breath, listening. Maximiliano was quiet, apparently hearing his mother out. Then he spoke again. "Mom, be reasonable." "All right, fine, I'll tell her." He came back to the kitchen, looking puzzled. She agreed. Said she won't take anything without asking anymore, but she asked that you don't hold a grudge against her either. Esperanza smirked. "I don't. I just want the boundaries to be clear." "Well then, shall we go on Saturday?" "We'll go." Saturday turned out sunny, a rarity for November. Esperanza put on a plain gray dress, neat and modest, minimal makeup, hair in a low bun. Maximiliano wore jeans and a sweater. Before they left, Esperanza asked, "Are we bringing anything?" "I don't know. Do we have to?" "It's awkward to show up at your mother's empty-handed." Maximiliano shrugged. "Then we'll buy something on the way." They stopped at a shop. Esperanza chose a cake and a box of chocolates. Maximiliano wanted to grab some fruit too, but she stopped him. "That's enough. This isn't a payoff, just a small courtesy." The bus ride took about 40 minutes. Remedios lived on the other side of town in an old 9-story building. Her apartment was a bright two-bedroom with a renovation she'd done about 10 years earlier and kept in perfect condition since. She loved order and cleanliness. Esperanza gave her that. They went up to the 6th floor and rang the bell. Remedios opened almost at once. She stood in the doorway in a dark green dress, her hair in a neat bob, light makeup on her face. She looked good for 58. "Hello," Esperanza said, handing her the cake box. "Hello," Remedios replied, taking the box with a nod. "Come in." They took off their coats in the hall and went into the living room. The table was already set with plates, salads, and cold cuts. Clearly, she had prepared. Esperanza sat on the sofa, Maximiliano beside her. Remedios went to put on the kettle, came back, and sat opposite. A silence settled. All three sat there, unsure where to begin. At last, Remedios sighed. "Well then, thank you for coming. I thought you wouldn't." "Why wouldn't we?" said Maximiliano. "You're my mother." "A mother," Remedios smirked, "just not the most important thing in your life, it seems." "Mom, don't start." Maximiliano winced. "I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying it like it is. You chose your wife over your mother." Esperanza felt irritation boiling up inside her. There it was again, manipulation. "Remedios," she said calmly, "Maximiliano didn't choose anyone. He simply did what he should. He protected his family, me, his wife." Her mother-in-law looked at her with a cool, appraising gaze. "Protected? From whom?" "From me? From being left without the groceries my parents brought especially for us. I only asked you to share a little. You didn't ask, you demanded it through Maximiliano, and he took it without my consent." Remedios pressed her lips together. "Well, excuse me. I didn't realize you split everything by the passport here. I thought we were a family." "Family is when you respect each other," said Esperanza. "When you ask instead of just taking. You didn't ask, neither me nor even Maximiliano properly. You just decided you were entitled." The mother-in-law was silent. Maximiliano stared at the table, clearly unwilling to intervene. Esperanza went on. "I'm not against helping you. Truly. If you need help, say so, and we'll help. But not by taking the last of what I have. Do you understand? Not at my expense." Remedios looked at her daughter-in-law for a long moment, then averted her eyes and sighed. "All right, I understand. I won't take anything without asking again. Satisfied?" "Thank you," Esperanza nodded. An awkward pause followed. Then Remedios stood. "All right, let's have tea before it gets cold." She went to the kitchen, brought the teapot and cups, poured the tea, pushed over the sugar. They drank in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Esperanza sipped in small gulps, looking out the window at rooftops, bare trees, the gray sky. "How are your parents?" Remedios asked suddenly. "They're fine," Esperanza answered. "Busy with the homestead. Give them my regards. And thanks for the food they brought. The chorizo was good, my son praised it." Esperanza almost choked on her tea. Was her mother-in-law serious right now? Maximiliano flushed and stared into his cup. Remedios looked unruffled, as if she didn't realize she'd said something odd. "I'll pass it along," Esperanza said coolly. They didn't talk about the food anymore. Remedios switched to other topics, asked her son about work, complained about the neighbors, shared bits of news about distant relatives. Esperanza half listened, nodding and occasionally adding a brief remark. Maximiliano brightened and chatted with his mother. It was clear he'd missed her. An hour later, they got ready to go home. Remedios walked them to the hall and helped Esperanza with her coat. On the threshold, she held her son by the hand. "Maximiliano, drop by more often. Don't forget your mother." "Okay, Mom. I'll come by. And bring Esperanza too. She should get used to it." Maximiliano nodded. Esperanza said nothing. They said their goodbyes and left. They went down the stairs in silence. Maximiliano walked ahead, Esperanza behind, holding the rail. When they stepped outside, Maximiliano exhaled with relief. "Well, looks like we made peace." "Looks like it," Esperanza agreed. "Are you angry?" "At whom?" "Well, at Mom, at me." Esperanza thought for a moment. "No, I'm not angry. I'm just tired of all this." "I understand." They walked toward the bus stop, and Esperanza thought about what had changed over these weeks. Something inside her had become firmer, steadier. She realized she could stand up for her opinion and her boundaries, that she didn't have to please everyone, that she had the right to say no. And that was an important discovery. At home, after they took off their coats and went into the kitchen, Maximiliano said, "Thanks for going." "You're welcome." "No, really. I know it was unpleasant for you, but I appreciate that you agreed." Esperanza looked at her husband. He stood by the table, slightly hunched, and for the first time in a long while she saw something like gratitude in his eyes. "Maximiliano, let's agree on this. Your mother is your responsibility. Help her, visit her, do what you want, but not to the detriment of our family, of me. Agreed?" "Agreed. And if she tries again to take something of ours without asking, stop it right away. Don't wait for me to find out and make a scene." Maximiliano nodded. "Okay, I'll stop it." Esperanza went to the bedroom, lay down, and closed her eyes. She was tired, emotionally drained by these weeks, but inside she felt a strange lightness, as if something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders. She had protected what was hers, defended her boundaries, and now she could breathe more freely. That evening her mother called. Esperanza told her how they'd gone to see her mother-in-law and how the conversation went. Her mother listened attentively, sighing now and then. "Well, it's good you made peace. Just don't let up. Give in once and she'll be back on your shoulders." "I won't, Mom. Not anymore. That's my girl." "All right, honey, take care of yourself. And eat properly. Don't skimp on food." "Okay, Mom." When the call ended, Esperanza lay there a bit longer, staring at the ceiling. Then she got up and went to the kitchen. She opened the fridge, took out the last piece of her parents' chorizo, sliced it thinly, laid it on bread, sat at the table, ate slowly, and thought about her parents, how they tried, how they brought the food, how her father came back and protected her, simply and reliably, without unnecessary words. The next day, Sunday, Esperanza woke with the feeling that she needed to do something, not just sit on her hands waiting for the money to run out and for every dollar to need counting. She had to change her life, even if in small steps. She sat at the table with a notebook and started writing down ideas. First, she could try to find a side job. The clinic had asked who wanted extra weekend shifts. They paid time and a half. She'd refused before, valuing her weekends, but now she thought, why not? One weekend a month was doable, an extra $80 to $100 wouldn't hurt. Second, she could start making some things herself instead of buying them, preserves, for example, or jam. Her parents had always done that and saved a lot. As a child, Esperanza had helped her mother and remembered how it was done. Third, she could review their expenses. There had to be places to cut and reallocate. Maximiliano, for instance, bought cigarettes every day. How many dollars a month was that? Maybe she should talk to him about quitting or at least cutting back. As Esperanza wrote and planned, she felt calmer. It felt like she was in control of the situation rather than drifting along. A week later she really did take an extra Saturday shift, work 8 hours, and got a nice bump in pay. She was tired, her legs ached, but the money was welcome. Maximiliano didn't object. He even made dinner that day, fried potatoes with sausages. Another week later, Esperanza talked to Maximiliano about the cigarettes. It wasn't an easy conversation. At first he snapped that it was his money and he'd decide how to spend it. But Esperanza calmly explained that the money was shared, and if he wanted to smoke, fine, just don't complain that there isn't enough for food. Maximiliano thought it over and agreed to cut back. He started buying them every 3 days instead of daily. The savings were small, but still. December came in cold. Esperanza went to work, took extra shifts, and gradually saved money. Maximiliano also picked up an evening side job, helping a friend at a building supplies store unloading goods. It didn't pay much, but it helped. By New Year's, for the first time in their 2 years of marriage, they were able to buy proper food for the holiday table without pinching every penny. Esperanza made salads, and Maximiliano helped chop vegetables. They worked together, and it felt nice, like something between them was finally falling into place. Remedios called once a week, talked to her son, and invited them over a couple of times, but Esperanza politely declined, citing fatigue and work. Maximiliano went to see his mother alone and brought her small gifts, a box of chocolates, a package of good tea, bought with his own side job money. Esperanza had no objections. One day at the end of December, her mother called, sounding excited. "Honey, we've got news. Your father's decided to butcher a pig for New Year's. We'll have lard and hams. We'll bring you some. Do you want it?" Esperanza smiled. "Of course I want it, Mom. Come. Just let me know in advance this time. I'll meet you and help carry the bags." "All right, sweetheart. We'll come after the holidays, around the 5th of January. Will you have rested a bit by then?" "I will, Mom. Thank you so much." When the call ended, Esperanza went to the kitchen. Maximiliano was sitting at the table, drinking tea. "My parents are coming again," Esperanza said. "They're bringing food." Maximiliano nodded. "Good. We should welcome them properly, help them out. You'll help carry the bags?" "Of course. I'm the man of the house, aren't I?" Esperanza looked at him and, for the first time in a long while, saw in her husband the man she had married, not perfect, not without flaws, but trying, making an effort to be better. On January 5th, her parents really did come. Esperanza met them at the entrance. Maximiliano came down to help with the bags. Her father silently handed him a heavy sack. Maximiliano took it without flinching and carried it up to the 5th floor, then came back for the second one. Her father watched him appraisingly, then gave a small approving nod. At home they sat down at the table while her mother began unpacking the food: lard, smoked hams, homemade sausage, a jar of sour cream, butter. Esperanza looked at the abundance and felt a wave of gratitude. Her parents had helped again, supported them again, as always, quietly, without speeches, through simple action. "Thank you," Esperanza said, hugging her mother. "Oh, nonsense, sweetheart. We do it for you." Her father sat at the table drinking tea. Maximiliano joined him, asked about the farm, about the harvest. They talked man to man, briefly, to the point. Her father answered sparingly, but Esperanza could tell he was pleased that his son-in-law showed interest. When her parents were getting ready to leave, her father lingered in the hallway. He called Maximiliano over and said something to him quietly. Esperanza didn't catch it but saw her husband nod seriously. Then her father patted him on the shoulder and left. When the door closed behind them, Esperanza asked, "What did my father say?" Maximiliano hesitated, then replied, "He said I'm doing well, that he can see I'm trying, and that I should keep it up. That's all. He also said that if anything happens, he's always nearby, but he hopes he won't have to come again to sort things out like before." Esperanza smiled. That was just like her father, a few words, and everything was clear. No lectures, no reproaches, just plain, fatherly honesty. That evening, after they'd unpacked all the food and sat down to dinner, Maximiliano suddenly said, "You know, I realized something." "What?" "That family isn't just a mother. Family, first of all, is you, my wife. And it's you I should take care of, not making sure my mother is happy."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.